The fluorescent lights above my hospital bed buzzed with an electric hum that seemed to match the chaos in my chest. My name is Emma Davis, and I'm lying here at Banner University Medical Center in Phoenix with internal bleeding that could kill me if I don't get surgery within the next few hours. The hiking accident on Camelback Mountain this morning had left me with a ruptured spleen and damaged liver, and the doctors were moving fast to prep me for emergency surgery. But that's not the worst part of this nightmare. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 20 minutes ago, I watched through my hospital room window as my parents, Bob and Linda Davis, walked up to the nurse's station. I couldn't hear them from where I was lying, but I could see my mother's mouth moving as she spoke to the charge nurse. I thought they were coming to check on me, to be by my side during the most terrifying moment of my 28 years. Instead, the nurse came back to my room with a confused expression and delivered words that cut deeper than any physical injury ever could. "I'm sorry, Miss Davis, but there seems to be some confusion. Your parents are saying they only have one daughter, and she's not here at the hospital today." The words hit me like a second fall down that mountain. My own parents had just denied my existence to the medical staff treating me. They had looked a nurse in the eye and pretended I didn't exist, as if 28 years of my life meant absolutely nothing to them, and I knew exactly why they were doing this. 3 hours ago, before my hiking accident, my sister Jessica had called them in hysterics because her latest Instagram sponsorship deal had fallen through. As always, Jessica's drama took priority over everything else, including their daughter bleeding out in an emergency room. But what happened next would change everything between us forever, and by the end of this story, you'll understand why I made the choice that shocked even me. Living in Phoenix, Arizona, has always felt like home to me, even though the desert heat can be brutal during summer months like this one. I've built my life here over the past 6 years, working as a senior software developer at TechFlow Solutions, a mid-sized company in Scottsdale that specializes in healthcare management systems. It's meaningful work that pays well, allowing me to save $45,000 toward my dream of launching my own healthcare technology startup. My daily routine involves a 25-minute commute from my 2-bedroom apartment in Tempe through the sprawling valley that makes up the Phoenix metropolitan area. The apartment isn't fancy, but it's mine: clean lines, minimal furniture, and a small balcony that overlooks the desert landscape. I chose it specifically because it represented everything I'd worked to achieve: independence, financial stability, and the freedom to make my own choices without anyone else's approval. The rent takes a significant chunk of my $85,000 salary, but living alone has been worth every penny, especially considering the alternative of moving back home with my parents. My parents, Bob and Linda Davis, live in a comfortable suburban house in Chandler, about 30 minutes south of my place depending on traffic. Bob retired 2 years ago after spending 35 years as an electrician, and Linda works part-time as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm. They're not wealthy, but they're comfortable living in the same 4-bedroom house where my sister Jessica and I grew up. The neighborhood is filled with families who've lived there for decades, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else's business and Sunday barbecues are still a regular tradition. Jessica, my 25-year-old sister, never left that house. She still lives in her childhood bedroom, which our parents converted into what they generously call her content creation studio. Jessica has built what she considers a career as an Instagram influencer, posting fashion hauls, workout routines, and lifestyle content to her 15,000 followers under the handle @JessicaDavisLife. Her posts feature carefully curated shots of designer clothes she can't afford, smoothie bowls she makes in our parents' kitchen, and motivational quotes overlaid on sunset photos taken from their backyard. The contrast between our lives couldn't be more stark. While I spent my early 20s working full-time and attending Arizona State University at night to earn my computer science degree, Jessica was posting TikTok dances and trying to become what she called a lifestyle guru. When I moved out at 22 to start my career, she stayed home convincing our parents that her social media presence was a legitimate business that just needed time to grow. When I scraped together savings to build toward my entrepreneurial dreams, she was asking our parents for money to buy ring lights and new outfits for her content. But here's what really stung: our parents treated Jessica's hobby like it was more important than my actual career. When she landed a $3,000 sponsorship deal with a local boutique last month, they threw her a celebration dinner and posted about it on their own Facebook pages as if she'd won a Nobel Prize. When I got promoted to senior developer with a $15,000 raise, I got a congratulations text and an immediate follow-up question about whether I'd be able to help Jessica with her car payment. This pattern of favoritism had been going on for as long as I could remember, but it reached a breaking point 6 months ago during what should have been a simple family dinner. I had driven down to Chandler on a Sunday afternoon, bringing takeout from their favorite Mexican restaurant as a gesture of goodwill. I'd been working on a particularly challenging project at work, debugging a complex healthcare database system, and I was excited to share the technical breakthrough I'd achieved. The system I designed is going to help hospitals track patient medications more efficiently, I explained, setting down the bag of food on their kitchen table. It could potentially prevent thousands of medication errors across the country. My father looked up from his phone with a distracted nod. "That's nice, Emma." Before I could elaborate, Jessica burst through the front door with her phone already recording. "Family, family, family," she announced to her camera. "Just got back from the most amazing photo shoot with Desert Bloom Boutique. The owner said my engagement rate is higher than influencers with 50,000 followers." Suddenly, both parents were completely engaged, asking Jessica detailed questions about her photo shoot, the boutique owner's reaction, and her future collaboration plans. The conversation about my healthcare system innovation evaporated as if it had never happened. I sat there eating my enchiladas in silence while Jessica showed them every single photo from her afternoon, explaining her creative vision behind each pose. That night, driving home through the dark desert highway, I realized something that had been building for years. My parents weren't just showing favoritism toward Jessica, they were actively ignoring my achievements because they didn't fit their idea of what success should look like. Jessica's lifestyle content was flashy and easy to understand, while my work in software development was technical and behind the scenes. They could brag about Jessica's Instagram followers to their neighbors, but they couldn't explain what I did for a living without sounding confused. The hiking accident that landed me in Banner University Medical Center happened on a Saturday morning in June, during what locals call the dry heat season when temperatures regularly hit 115 degrees. I had planned a solo hike up Camelback Mountain, one of Phoenix's most popular hiking destinations, as a way to clear my head before a crucial week at work. We were launching a new software update that I'd spent 4 months developing, and I needed the mental clarity that only a challenging desert hike could provide. Camelback Mountain rises 1,300 feet above the valley floor, its distinctive shape resembling a resting camel when viewed from the city below. The Echo Canyon Trail is steep and rocky, requiring hikers to use their hands for climbing in several sections.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
I'd done this hike dozens of times over the years, always starting early in the morning to avoid the dangerous afternoon heat. This particular Saturday, I began the ascent at 6:30 in the morning when the temperature was still manageable at 92 degrees. The accident happened about halfway up the mountain, at a section where the trail becomes a series of natural rock ledges. I was photographing the sunrise over the valley below when my hiking boots slipped on a loose rock. The fall wasn't dramatic, maybe 8 feet down onto a rocky outcropping, but I landed hard on my left side against a jagged boulder. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and I immediately knew something was seriously wrong. Sharp pain radiated through my abdomen, and I could taste something metallic in my mouth. Two other hikers found me 20 minutes later, and one of them was a nurse who recognized the signs of internal bleeding. She called 911 while her companion helped keep me conscious and still. The Phoenix Fire Department's mountain rescue team reached me within 40 minutes, but getting me down the mountain took another hour. By the time the ambulance arrived at Banner University Medical Center, I was drifting in and out of consciousness, and the emergency room doctors immediately ordered a CT scan that revealed the extent of my injuries. "You have a grade 4 splenic laceration and liver contusion, doctor," Sarah Mitchell explained, her voice calm but urgent. "We need to get you into surgery within the next few hours to stop the internal bleeding. Do you have family we can contact?" I gave them my parents' contact information and Jessica's number, assuming they would want to be here for what could potentially be life-threatening surgery. The pain medication made everything feel surreal, but I remember feeling grateful that I wouldn't have to face this alone. Despite all the family drama and favoritism, I still believed that in a genuine emergency, my parents would prioritize my well-being over Jessica's latest social media crisis. That belief lasted exactly 3 hours and 27 minutes. While I was being prepped for surgery, Jessica had called our parents in complete meltdown mode. The boutique that had promised her a long-term collaboration had decided to go with a different influencer, someone with a larger following and better engagement rates. To Jessica, this felt like the end of the world, a devastating blow to her dreams of becoming a successful lifestyle influencer. She needed immediate emotional support, comfort, and probably financial assistance to get through this crushing disappointment. Our parents, following their lifelong pattern, dropped everything to rush to Jessica's aid. They drove to her favorite coffee shop in Scottsdale, where she was having what she dramatically called a complete breakdown. While I lay in a hospital bed with internal bleeding, they were buying her expensive lattes and listening to her sob about lost opportunities and social media algorithms. When the hospital called to inform them about my accident and upcoming surgery, they were in the middle of Jessica's crisis management session. According to what I learned later, my mother actually told the nurse that they were dealing with a family emergency and couldn't come to the hospital right away. The family emergency, of course, was Jessica's sponsorship disappointment, not their other daughter's potentially fatal internal injuries. But they did eventually show up at the hospital, which is why I saw them through my window talking to the charge nurse. What I couldn't hear from my room was the conversation that would change our relationship forever. Later I learned the exact words from Ashley Chen, my best friend and coworker, who happened to be visiting her grandmother in the same hospital that day and overheard the entire exchange. "We're here about the Davis family situation," my mother had said to the nurse, "but there seems to be some confusion in your records." The charge nurse, checking her computer, replied, "Yes, we have Emma Davis in room 314 preparing for emergency surgery. Are you her parents? That's where the confusion is," my father said. "This?" His voice steady and cold. "We only have one daughter and she's not here today. She's at home dealing with a career crisis. We don't know who this Emma person is, but she's not our family." Ashley told me later that she couldn't believe what she was hearing. The nurse looked confused and asked them to clarify, explaining that Emma Davis had specifically given their names and contact information as her emergency contacts. My mother shook her head firmly and repeated that they had only one daughter, and that daughter was Jessica. "Maybe this Emma person is confused or using our names for some reason," my mother suggested. "But we can't take responsibility for someone who isn't our family." The nurse, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, suggested they might want to double-check by visiting room 314, but my parents declined. They said they needed to get back to their real daughter who was having a genuine emergency. Then they left the hospital without ever coming to see me, without acknowledging that the woman preparing for life-saving surgery was the child they had raised for 28 years. When the nurse came to my room to deliver their message, I felt something break inside me that went deeper than any physical injury. The ruptured spleen and liver damage were fixable with surgery, but the knowledge that my own parents had actively denied my existence when I needed them most created a wound that no doctor could heal. As I lay there waiting for surgery, connected to monitors and IV lines, I realized that this wasn't just about favoritism anymore. This was about parents who had become so invested in Jessica's version of success that they were willing to pretend I didn't exist rather than divide their attention during her crisis. They had chosen her disappointment over my emergency, her hurt feelings over my physical survival. The surgery took 4 hours, and I woke up in recovery with Ashley Chen holding my hand. She had canceled her Saturday plans to stay with me, something my own parents couldn't be bothered to do. Marcus Thompson, my boyfriend of 8 months, arrived shortly after I woke up with flowers and the relieved expression of someone who had been genuinely worried about losing someone they cared about. The people who actually valued me had shown up, while the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had chosen to pretend I didn't exist. But the real shock was yet to come. As I recovered over the next few days, I learned that my parents had not only denied my existence at the hospital, they had also been posting on social media about supporting Jessica through her devastating career setback. My mother shared a Facebook post about how proud she was of Jessica's resilience, while my father posted photos of them taking Jessica out for a healing dinner at her favorite steakhouse. Not a single word about their other daughter being in the hospital. Not even a private message asking if I was okay. As far as their social media presence was concerned, Emma Davis simply didn't exist during one of the most frightening experiences of her life. That's when I knew everything had to change. The recovery room felt like a different world when I finally woke up from surgery. The harsh fluorescent lights had been dimmed, and the constant beeping of machines created a rhythm that was somehow comforting rather than alarming. Doctor Sarah Mitchell appeared beside my bed with a gentle smile, explaining that the surgery had been successful and that my spleen had been saved through a procedure called splenic salvage. The liver contusion was healing well, and while I would need several weeks of recovery, there shouldn't be any long-term complications. "You're lucky," she said, checking the monitors connected to various parts of my body. "Another hour of delay and we might have been looking at a very different outcome." Lucky. The word felt hollow as I remembered my parents walking away from the hospital, refusing to acknowledge my existence during those critical hours when every minute mattered. Ashley Chen squeezed my hand as Dr. Mitchell left, and I could see the concern in her eyes that went beyond just worry about my physical recovery. "Emma, I need to tell you something about what I overheard," Ashley said carefully. "I was visiting my grandmother on the 3rd floor when I saw your parents talking to the charge nurse. What they said? It was worse than you know." As Ashley recounted the conversation she had witnessed, each word felt like a fresh wound. My parents hadn't just been unavailable during my emergency, they had actively and deliberately denied that I was their daughter. They had looked a medical professional in the eye and claimed they only had one child, effectively disowning me during the most vulnerable moment of my life. They seemed so certain about it. Ashley continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your mother didn't hesitate when she said they only had one daughter. It wasn't confusion or panic. It was a conscious choice to pretend you don't exist. The pain medication made everything feel distant and surreal, but the emotional impact was sharp and immediate. I had spent years making excuses for my parents' favoritism, telling myself that they loved both Jessica and me equally, just in different ways. But this wasn't favoritism anymore. This was complete rejection, a willingness to erase me from their family rather than split their attention between two daughters during a crisis. Marcus arrived that evening with a small bouquet of desert wildflowers and the kind of worried expression that only comes from genuine care. He had driven straight from his weekend camping trip in Sedona when Ashley called him about the accident, cutting his vacation short without hesitation. The contrast between his immediate response and my parents' deliberate absence wasn't lost on me. "How are you feeling?" he asked, settling into the uncomfortable hospital chair that Ashley had vacated. And don't give me the polite answer. Tell me the truth. Marcus worked as a graphic designer for a marketing agency in downtown Phoenix, and we had met 8 months earlier through a mutual friend at a tech industry networking event. He was the kind of person who noticed details, who remembered things that mattered to you, who showed up when he said he would. Our relationship had been steady and comfortable, built on shared interests and genuine respect for each other's careers and goals. Physically, I'm going to be fine, I said, trying to find words for the emotional chaos churning inside me. But my parents were here today, and they told the hospital staff that they only have one daughter. They refuse to acknowledge that I'm their child. Marcus's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, anger, before settling into something that looked like protective determination. They what, Emma? That's not just favoritism. I don't even have words for what that is. Over the next hour, I found myself telling Marcus stories I had never fully articulated before. The pattern of dismissal that had shaped my entire relationship with my parents, the way Jessica's needs and wants always took priority over mine, the subtle and not so subtle ways they had made it clear that her happiness mattered more than my achievements or well-being. "Remember when you got that promotion last year?" Marcus said. "You were so excited about the recognition and the raise, but when you called to tell them, they immediately started talking about Jessica's latest Instagram collaboration." I nodded, remembering how deflated I had felt after that phone call. "They said they were proud of me, but then they spent 20 minutes asking if I thought Jessica's content was getting better engagement than before." "And what about when you bought your apartment?" Marcus continued. "You had saved for 2 years for that down payment, and it was this huge milestone of independence and financial responsibility. But at the housewarming party, your parents spent the whole time talking about how Jessica needed a bigger space for her content creation." The memories were painful, but there was something clarifying about hearing them reflected back from someone who cared about me. Marcus had witnessed many of these interactions over the past 8 months, and his perspective helped me understand that what I had normalized as typical family dynamics was actually a pattern of emotional neglect and manipulation. "Emma, healthy families don't operate this way," he said gently. "Parents don't choose between their children like this. They don't deny one child's existence to prioritize another's comfort." The next morning brought a cascade of social media posts that made my parents' priorities crystal clear. My mother had shared a lengthy Facebook update about Jessica's resilience in the face of professional disappointment, complete with photos from their dinner at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse the night before. The post talked about how proud they were of Jessica's strength and determination, how they knew she would bounce back from this setback stronger than ever. My father had posted a photo of himself and Jessica at the restaurant, both of them smiling broadly, with the caption, "Sometimes the best thing you can do for your daughter is just be there to listen." The irony was almost too painful to process. While I was lying in a hospital bed recovering from emergency surgery, they were celebrating their availability and support for Jessica's career disappointment. But the most devastating part was reading through the comments. Friends and neighbors were praising my parents for being such devoted and caring parents, for always putting their daughter first, for showing up when it mattered most. Person after person commented about what wonderful parents they were, how lucky Jessica was to have such unwavering support. Not one of these commenters knew that Bob and Linda Davis had another daughter, one who had nearly died from internal bleeding while they were buying expensive steaks and posting about their parental devotion. In their public narrative, I simply didn't exist, and they seemed perfectly comfortable with that version of their family story. Ashley brought me my laptop on the second day of my hospital stay, and I found myself scrolling through years of my parents' social media posts with new eyes. The pattern was there, clear and undeniable, once I knew what to look for. Hundreds of posts about Jessica's activities, achievements, and milestones. Photos from her high school graduation, her college parties, her various job attempts, her social media successes, her relationship drama, her fashion choices, her travel adventures, and then there was the absence. Searching for my name in their posts yielded almost nothing. A brief mention when I graduated from Arizona State University, buried in a longer post about Jessica starting her Instagram account. A single photo from my college graduation, but it was a group shot that included Jessica, who had demanded to be in the picture. A few tagged photos from family gatherings where I appeared in the background, but never as the focus or subject of the post. It was like looking at a deliberate erasure of my existence from their family narrative. They had been practicing for years, gradually editing me out of their public story, until it became natural to claim they only had one daughter. The hospital incident wasn't an aberration, it was the logical conclusion of a process that had been happening gradually for years. The most painful discovery was a post from my mother's Facebook page from 2 years earlier. She had shared one of those sentimental memes about motherhood, overlaid with text that read, "A mother's love for her daughter is forever and unconditional." Below the meme, she had written a long comment about how blessed she felt to have such a wonderful daughter, how proud she was of the woman Jessica had become, how their bond was unbreakable. The post had dozens of likes and comments from family friends, all responding as if Linda Davis had only one daughter to be proud of. I scrolled through every comment looking for any mention of me, any acknowledgement that she had 2 daughters to love unconditionally. There was nothing. To anyone reading that post, Linda Davis was the devoted mother of a single child named Jessica. Dr. Mitchell discharged me on Thursday morning with strict instructions about physical limitations and follow-up appointments. The surgical site was healing well, but I would need to avoid heavy lifting and strenuous activity for at least 6 weeks. Ashley had arranged to work from my apartment for the first few days to help with basic needs like grocery shopping and meal preparation. "Are you going to call your parents?" Ashley asked as we settled into my living room. "I mean, they don't know you're out of the hospital? They don't even know if the surgery was successful." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Part of me wanted to call them, to force them to acknowledge what they had done, to demand an explanation for their behavior at the hospital, but another part of me, a part that was growing stronger with each passing hour, wondered why I should be the one reaching out. They had made their choice when they denied my existence to the medical staff. They had reinforced that choice with their social media celebration of Jessica's resilience. Why should I call them? I asked, the words coming out harder than I expected. They made it clear that they only have one daughter. I should respect their wishes and stop pretending to be part of their family. Ashley looked concerned. "Emma, they're still your parents. Maybe they were just panicked and confused. Maybe they didn't understand the seriousness of your condition." But I knew better. The conversation Ashley had overheard wasn't confused or panicked. It was deliberate and calculated. My mother had specifically said they only had one daughter, and that daughter was dealing with her own crisis at home. They had been given the opportunity to visit my room, to confirm or deny my identity, and they had chosen to leave the hospital instead. That afternoon, Jessica called my phone. I stared at her name on the screen for several rings before deciding to answer, curious about what she might say. Did she know about my accident? Had our parents mentioned anything about a confused woman at the hospital claiming to be their daughter? "Emma, oh my God, I've had the worst weekend of my entire life." Jessica's voice poured through the phone without any greeting or inquiry about my well-being. "The boutique deal fell through, and I'm completely devastated. I thought this was going to be my big break, you know. The owner said my engagement rates weren't high enough, which is totally unfair because I have really loyal followers." She continued for 10 minutes without pausing, detailing every aspect of her disappointment. The conversation with the boutique owner, our parents' support during her crisis, and her plans for finding new collaboration opportunities. Not once did she ask how I was doing or mention anything about hospital visits or medical emergencies. "Mom and Dad have been so amazing through all of this," Jessica continued. "They dropped everything to be with me when I needed them most. We went to Ruth's Chris last night, and Dad said he's never been prouder of how I handle professional setbacks. They really understand how important my career is." The casual mention of the dinner presented as evidence of our parents' devotion and support was like a knife twist. While I was recovering from surgery alone,
They were celebrating Jessica's resilience at an expensive steakhouse, posting about their pride in her strength, completely erasing my existence from their family narrative. That sounds wonderful, I said carefully. I'm glad they were able to be there for you. They always are, Jessica said with complete confidence. That's what family is for, right? Being there when it matters most. Anyway, I should go. I'm meeting with another potential sponsor this afternoon, and I need to prepare my media kit. She hung up without asking a single question about my life, my work, or my well-being. The conversation confirmed what I already suspected: my parents hadn't told Jessica about my accident or hospitalization. In their version of events, nothing had happened over the weekend except Jessica's career disappointment and their
supportive response to her crisis. That evening, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I blocked my parents' phone numbers and removed them from all my social media accounts. I unfriended them on Facebook, unfollowed them on Instagram, and deleted their contact information from my phone. If they wanted to maintain the fiction that they only had one daughter, I would help them commit to that story completely. The physical healing over the next 2 weeks was straightforward and predictable. The surgical site gradually became less tender, my energy levels slowly returned to normal, and Dr. Mitchell's follow-up appointments showed excellent progress. But the emotional healing was more complicated, involving a complete reevaluation of relationships and assumptions I had held my entire life. Marcus was incredibly supportive during this period, bringing dinner most evenings and listening as I worked through years of suppressed feelings about my family dynamics. Ashley coordinated a rotating schedule of friends from work who helped with errands and provided companionship during the long days of recovery. The contrast between their consistent care and my parents' complete absence was stark and illuminating. "Have you heard from your family at all?" Marcus asked one evening as we watched the sunset from my apartment balcony. "Nothing," I said, and realized I felt relieved rather than hurt by their silence. They don't know if I survived the surgery, if I'm recovering well, or if I need any help, and apparently they're fine with not knowing. "That says everything you need to know about who they really are," Marcus replied. "People who genuinely care about you don't just disappear when you need them most." 2 weeks after my discharge from the hospital, I returned to work at TechFlow Solutions with medical clearance for desk work but restrictions on physical activity. My colleagues had sent flowers to the hospital and covered my projects during my absence without complaint. My supervisor, David Park, had personally called to check on my recovery and assured me that my position and upcoming projects would be waiting when I was ready. The contrast between my work family's concern and my actual family's indifference was impossible to ignore. People who saw me for 40 hours a week showed more genuine care for my well-being than the people who had raised me. My TechFlow colleagues asked detailed questions about my recovery, offered ongoing help with physical tasks, and expressed genuine relief that I was okay. "We were really worried about you," said Maria Santos, one of the other senior developers. "Internal bleeding is no joke. How are you feeling emotionally? That kind of trauma can be harder to recover from than the physical injuries." Her question caught me off guard, partly because she was right about the emotional trauma, and partly because she was the first person to acknowledge that surviving a serious accident involved more than just physical healing. My parents, if they had been present, probably would have focused entirely on practical concerns like medical bills and time off work. During my 3rd week back at work, I received a phone call that would force me to confront the full extent of my family's betrayal. It was Dr. Mitchell's office, calling to confirm my upcoming follow-up appointment and to clarify some insurance information. "Miss Davis, we're having some difficulty processing your claim," the billing coordinator explained. "Your insurance company is asking for verification that the surgery was medically necessary, and they want documentation from your emergency contacts confirming the circumstances of your accident." "What kind of documentation?" I asked, though I already suspected where this was heading. They need a statement from your parents or immediate family members confirming that you were injured during a hiking accident and required emergency surgery. It's a standard procedure for large claims involving trauma situations. The irony was almost laughable. The same parents who had denied my existence at the hospital were now needed to verify my identity for insurance purposes. The same people who had refused to acknowledge me as their daughter were being asked to confirm the circumstances of my medical emergency. "I'll handle this directly with the insurance company," I told the billing coordinator. "My emergency contacts may not be available to provide that documentation." That afternoon, I spent 2 hours on the phone with my insurance company, providing detailed documentation of my accident and surgery without any family verification. I submitted photos from the hiking trail, medical records from Dr. Mitchell, and a statement from the Phoenix Fire Department rescue team that had retrieved me from Camelback Mountain. It was more complicated than it would have been with family support, but it was manageable. The experience reinforced something I was slowly beginning to understand. I could handle life's challenges without my parents' involvement or support. In fact, I had been handling most challenges on my own for years, while they focused their attention and energy on Jessica's various crises and adventures. As my physical recovery continued, I found myself thinking more clearly about my relationship with my family and what I wanted moving forward. The hospital incident hadn't created the problems in our relationship, it had simply revealed problems that had existed for years. My parents' favoritism, their dismissal of my achievements, their constant prioritization of Jessica's needs over mine, these patterns had been shaping our interactions since childhood. But now I had a choice. I could continue trying to earn their recognition and approval, accepting their treatment as normal family dynamics, or I could build a life that didn't depend on their validation. I could stop waiting for them to see my worth, and start fully appreciating the relationships with people who already recognized and valued who I was. The decision felt both obvious and terrifying, but it also felt like the first truly adult choice I had ever made about my family relationships. 3 months after my surgery, I was back to full health and throwing myself into work with an intensity that surprised even me. The healthcare management system I had been developing before my accident was now in beta testing at 2 major Phoenix hospitals, and the early feedback was overwhelmingly positive. The project represented everything I loved about software development: solving real problems, improving people's lives, and creating something that would have lasting impact beyond corporate profit margins. My supervisor David Park had been impressed enough with the system's performance to recommend me for a promotion to lead developer, which came with a $20,000 salary increase and my own team of junior programmers. The recognition felt genuine and earned, based on measurable results rather than personality or family connections. For the first time in my adult life, I was experiencing what it felt like to be valued for my actual contributions rather than dismissed or overlooked. "Emma, this system you've designed is going to revolutionize how hospitals track patient medications," David said during my performance review. "The error reduction rate in our beta tests is exceeding every projection. I want you to present this to the board next month." The board presentation went better than I could have hoped. The executives were genuinely excited about the commercial potential of my system, and they approved funding for me to expand the team and develop additional features. More importantly, they offered me a partnership track within the company, with the possibility of owning equity in any products I developed. It was the kind of professional recognition I had dreamed about since starting my career, and it came at exactly the moment when I was learning to value myself independently of my family's approval. The timing felt symbolic, as if the universe was confirming that my worth had never depended on my parents' recognition. Marcus and I celebrated the promotion at the Henry, the upscale restaurant in Phoenix where I had planned to take my parents for a celebration dinner that never happened. This time, the dinner was exactly what it should be: a genuine celebration with someone who understood the significance of my achievements and felt proud to be part of my success. "I'm so proud of you," Marcus said, raising his glass of wine, not just for the promotion, but for everything you've accomplished while dealing with your family situation. You've proven that your success doesn't depend on anyone else's validation. The conversation turned to our future plans, both professionally and personally. Marcus had been offered a position with a design firm in Denver, a move that would advance his own career significantly. We talked honestly about the possibility of a long-distance relationship or whether I might consider relocating as well. TechFlow has been talking about expanding to other markets, I said. If I'm successful with this healthcare system, they might be open to letting me establish a satellite office wherever I want to be. The idea of leaving Phoenix felt both exciting and terrifying. This city had been my home for 6 years, the place where I had built my independence and established my career, but it was also the place where my family lived, where I was constantly reminded of their rejection and indifference. A fresh start in a new city might be exactly what I needed to fully move forward. 4 months after blocking my parents' contact information, I received an unexpected phone call at work. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, I heard my mother's voice for the first time since the hospital incident. "Emma, it's Mom," Linda Davis said, her voice sounding strained and uncertain. "I got your work number from the company directory online. We need to talk." My first instinct was to hang up immediately, but curiosity kept me on the line. What could possibly motivate them to reach out after months of complete silence? What crisis or need could be significant enough to break through their apparent comfort with pretending I didn't exist? "I'm at work, so I only have a few minutes," I said, keeping my voice professional and distant. "Emma, something terrible has happened," my mother continued, and I could hear tears in her voice. "It's Jessica, she's in serious trouble, and we don't know what to do." The familiar pattern was immediately obvious. My parents had spent months maintaining their fiction that they only had one daughter, completely ignoring my existence and well-being. But now that Jessica was facing some kind of crisis, they suddenly remembered that I existed and might be useful to them. "What kind of trouble?" I asked, though part of me already suspected it would involve money. "She's been sued," my mother said. "That boutique collaboration that fell through. Jessica had already spent the advance money they gave her, and when the deal was cancelled, they demanded it back. She couldn't pay them, so now they're taking her to court for breach of contract and fraud." The irony was staggering. While I had been recovering from emergency surgery, my parents had celebrated Jessica's resilience in the face of professional disappointment. They had posted on social media about her strength and their pride in her character. Now it turned out that Jessica's version of handling the disappointment had involved spending money she hadn't actually earned. "How much money are we talking about?" I asked. $12,000, my mother replied, plus legal fees and damages. "The lawyer says she could end up owing $25,000 or more." "Emma, we don't have that kind of money. Your father's retirement savings are already stretched, and my part-time job barely covers our basic expenses." There it was, the real reason for the phone call. After months of denying my existence, they needed my financial resources to solve Jessica's latest crisis. They had calculated that I was successful enough to have savings, responsible enough to help family members in trouble, and forgiving enough to overlook their previous behavior. "Why are you calling me?" I asked. "I thought you only had one daughter." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When my mother finally spoke, her voice was defensive and pleading at the same time. "Emma, we know you're upset about the hospital situation, but this is different. This is about Jessica's future. She could face criminal charges if we can't resolve this. She needs her family's support." "Her family," I repeated. "You mean the family that includes me? The daughter you told the hospital staff didn't exist?" "We were confused that day," my mother said quickly. "We were dealing with Jessica's crisis, and we didn't understand what was happening at the hospital. We made a mistake, but I knew it hadn't been confusion or a mistake." Ashley had overheard the entire conversation, and my parents had been clear and deliberate in their denial of my existence. They had been given opportunities to visit my room, to confirm my identity, to acknowledge our relationship, and they had chosen to leave the hospital instead. "Mom, I need you to understand something." I said, my voice steady despite the emotional storm inside me. When you told that nurse you only had one daughter, you made a choice. When you left the hospital without checking on me, you made a choice. When you celebrated Jessica's resilience while I was recovering from surgery alone, you made a choice. Those weren't mistakes or confusion, those were deliberate decisions about what kind of family you wanted to be. Emma, please, my mother said, and now she was crying openly. We love you. We've always loved you, we just needed to be there for Jessica during her crisis. And what about during my crisis? I asked. What about when I needed you to be there for me? You chose Jessica's career disappointment over my emergency surgery, you chose her hurt feelings over my physical survival. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with my mother alternating between apologies, justifications, and increasingly desperate pleas for financial help. She insisted that they had always loved me equally, that Jessica's legal troubles were more serious than my medical emergency had been, that families were supposed to help each other during difficult times. If families are supposed to help each other, where were you when I was in the hospital? I asked. Where were you during my recovery? Where were you when I got my promotion, or when I was developing a system that's going to help thousands of patients? You were posting on social media about Jessica's strength, while completely ignoring my existence. We didn't know how to reach out after what happened at the hospital, my mother admitted. We were embarrassed and didn't know what to say, but you knew how to reach out when you needed money, I pointed out. You figured out how to contact me when Jessica's crisis required financial resources you don't have. By the end of the conversation, my mother had made it clear that they expected me to contribute significantly to Jessica's legal expenses. She emphasized that I was the only family member with substantial savings, that Jessica's future depended on resolving this lawsuit quickly, and that refusing to help would make me responsible for whatever consequences Jessica faced. Emma, if you don't help us with this, Jessica could go to jail, my mother said. How would you feel knowing you could have prevented that but chose not to? The manipulation was obvious and familiar. They were trying to make me responsible for Jessica's poor decisions, just as they had always made me responsible for managing their expectations and disappointments. They wanted me to believe that my success created an obligation to solve problems caused by Jessica's irresponsibility and their enabling behavior. After hanging up, I sat in my office for a long time, staring out at the Phoenix skyline and thinking about the choice I was facing. I had $47,000 in savings, money I had accumulated through years of careful budgeting and financial discipline. I could easily afford to pay Jessica's legal expenses without significantly impacting my own plans or security. But paying for Jessica's mistakes would also confirm that my parents had been right to prioritize her needs over mine. It would validate their belief that I existed primarily to solve problems they couldn't handle themselves. Most importantly, it would enable Jessica to continue making irresponsible decisions without facing real consequences. That evening, I talked through the situation with Marcus, who listened without judgment while I worked through my complicated feelings about family loyalty, financial responsibility, and personal boundaries. What do you want to do? Marcus asked. Not what you think you should do, or what would make them happy, but what feels right for you. I want them to experience the natural consequences of their choices. I said. They chose to prioritize Jessica's comfort over my safety. They chose to deny my existence, rather than acknowledge that they have two daughters with different needs. They chose to enable Jessica's irresponsible behavior instead of helping her develop real-world skills and accountability. Then that's your answer, Marcus said. You don't owe them anything, especially not after how they treated you. The next morning, I called my mother back and gave her my decision. I won't be contributing money to resolve Jessica's legal problems, I said. She made adult choices that have adult consequences, and she needs to find adult solutions. My mother's reaction was immediate and intense. She accused me of being selfish and vindictive, of holding grudges and punishing Jessica for mistakes that weren't really her fault. She insisted that I was destroying the family by refusing to help during a genuine emergency. This isn't about punishment, I explained. This is about natural consequences. Jessica spent money she hadn't earned, and now she needs to deal with the legal and financial consequences of that decision. Bailing her out won't help her learn to make better choices. But you have the money, my mother said, as if having savings automatically created an obligation to spend them on other people's problems. You could solve this problem easily. I could, I agreed. But solving Jessica's problems for her hasn't helped her become more responsible. It's only taught her that she can make poor decisions without facing real consequences because someone else will always fix things for her. The conversation ended with my mother hanging up on me, but not before making it clear that refusing to help Jessica would result in complete estrangement from the family. She said they couldn't have a relationship with someone who would abandon her sister during a crisis, someone who cared more about money than family loyalty. If you won't help Jessica, then you're not really part of this family anymore, my mother said. We can't pretend to have a relationship with someone who would let her own sister go to jail over money. You already decided I wasn't part of the family, I replied. You made that clear at the hospital when you told the staff you only had one daughter. I'm just accepting the family structure you've already established. 2 weeks later, Ashley sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post from my mother's account. The post was a lengthy explanation of Jessica's legal troubles, presented as if she were the victim of a predatory business practice, rather than someone who had spent money she hadn't earned. The post asked friends and extended family members to contribute to a fundraising campaign for Jessica's legal expenses. Our daughter is facing a lawsuit from a company that's trying to take advantage of young entrepreneurs, the post read. Jessica signed a contract in good faith, but the company changed the terms and is now demanding money back that she had already invested in her business. We're asking for help from people who believe in supporting young women trying to build their careers. The post had dozens of sympathetic comments and several small donations, but it was clear that the fundraising wasn't going to cover Jessica's full legal expenses. My mother had also posted several passive-aggressive updates about family members who had refused to help during this difficult time, clearly referring to me without mentioning my name directly. Some people have more money than heart, one of her posts said. It's sad when family members turn their backs on you just when you need them most. The social media campaign felt like a continuation of the pattern I had recognized months earlier. My parents were comfortable presenting themselves as devoted parents to their one daughter, while simultaneously vilifying me for refusing to enable Jessica's irresponsible behavior. They had found a way to maintain their narrative while making me the villain in Jessica's story. 6 months after my surgery, I accepted a position with a tech startup in Denver that specialized in healthcare innovations. The job came with a significant salary increase, equity in the company, and the opportunity to lead a team developing cutting-edge medical software. More importantly, it represented a complete fresh start in a city where I had no family history or complicated relationships. Marcus had accepted his position with the Denver design firm, and we found an apartment together in the downtown area with mountain views and easy access to hiking trails. The move felt symbolic of everything I had learned about building a life based on my own values rather than other people's expectations or approval. My last day at TechFlow Solutions was bittersweet, but my colleagues threw a farewell party that reinforced how much genuine support and friendship I had built in Phoenix. These relationships, based on mutual respect and shared professional goals, had sustained me through the most difficult period of my life. You've taught us all something important, David Park said during his farewell speech. You've shown us what it looks like to succeed based on merit and hard work, without compromising your integrity or values. 3 days before my move to Denver, I received one final phone call from my father. His voice sounded older and more tired than I remembered, and he got straight to the point without any small talk or pleasantries. Emma, Jessica's court date is next week, he said. We've raised some money through the fundraising campaign, but it's not enough. She's going to face criminal charges unless we can pay the full settlement amount. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I genuinely was sorry that the situation had reached this point. We're begging you, my father continued, one last time, we're asking you to help your sister avoid jail time. After this, we won't ask for anything else, we just need you to do this one thing for family. The plea was familiar and predictable, but it no longer had the emotional power over me that it once would have. I had spent months learning to distinguish between genuine family loyalty and emotional manipulation, between helping people and enabling destructive behavior. Dad, Jessica created this situation through her own choices, I said. She spent money she hadn't earned, failed to fulfill her contractual obligations, and apparently lied to the boutique about her circumstances. Those are adult decisions that have adult consequences. But you could prevent those consequences, he said. You have the money to solve this problem. Having money doesn't create an obligation to solve problems that other adults create for themselves, I replied. Jessica needs to learn that her actions have real consequences, and that lesson will serve her better in the long run than another bailout. My father was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was resigned rather than angry. I guess this means we won't be seeing you anymore. You stopped seeing me months ago, I said. You made that choice at the hospital when you told the staff you only had one daughter. I'm just living according to the family structure you established. We made a mistake that day, he said. We were panicked and confused. No, you weren't, I said firmly. You made a calculated decision to prioritize Jessica's emotional comfort over my physical safety. You chose to deny my existence rather than divide your attention between two daughters in crisis. That wasn't confusion, that was a clear statement of your values and priorities. The conversation ended without resolution or reconciliation, but also without anger or bitterness. My father seemed to understand, finally, that I was not going to resume my role as the reliable daughter who solved family problems while receiving no recognition or support in return. 1 week later, Ashley forwarded me a news article from a Phoenix newspaper about Jessica's court case. She had pleaded guilty to breach of contract and fraud, receiving a suspended sentence and 5 years of probation in exchange for making monthly payments toward the settlement amount. She would avoid jail time, but she would also be making payments for years and dealing with the legal and financial consequences of her choices. My parents posted nothing on social media about the court case or its outcome. Their online presence became noticeably quieter, with fewer celebratory posts about Jessica's resilience and strength. The reality of legal consequences had apparently made it harder to present her situation as a success story or learning experience. In Denver, I thrived in ways I hadn't expected. The new job challenged me professionally while respecting my expertise and judgment. My relationship with Marcus deepened as we built a shared life based on mutual support and genuine partnership. I made new friends through work and recreational activities, relationships that were uncomplicated by family history or predetermined roles. Most importantly, I learned what it felt like to be valued for who I actually was rather than what I could provide for other people. The contrast was striking and liberating, confirming that my decision to distance myself from my family had been necessary for my own emotional and psychological health. 6 months after moving to Denver, I launched my own healthcare technology consulting firm, using my savings and experience to build something that was entirely my own creation. The business grew quickly, attracting clients who appreciated both my technical expertise and my integrity in handling sensitive medical data. The success felt different from previous achievements because it was built on a foundation of self-respect rather than a desperate need for external validation. I had learned to appreciate my own accomplishments without requiring anyone else's approval or recognition, and that internal confidence made me more effective in both my professional and personal relationships. Looking back on the hospital incident that had changed everything, I realized it had been a gift disguised as a betrayal. My parents' denial of my existence had forced me to confront the reality of our relationship and make choices based on my own well-being rather than their expectations. Their cruelty had ultimately freed me from a family dynamic that had been limiting my growth and happiness for years. The woman who had desperately wanted her parents' approval and recognition no longer existed. In her place was someone who understood her own worth, who built relationships based on mutual respect, who made decisions according to her own values, rather than other people's demands. Sometimes I wondered if my parents ever regretted their choice to deny my existence during my medical emergency. Did they ever consider how different our relationship might have been if they had shown up for me during that frightening time? Did they understand that their decision had consequences that extended far beyond that single day? But those questions no longer kept me awake at night.
I had built a life that didn't depend on their answers, recognition, or approval. I had learned that family was something you chose as much as something you were born into, and I had chosen to surround myself with people who genuinely valued and supported me. The story of the parents who told the hospital they only had one daughter had ended exactly as they had requested. They had their one daughter, and I had my freedom. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.